You can watch a free video excerpt from the second subscription level and continue watching other exclusive videos at a 50% discount on my Boosty. Enjoy watching. Description: incredibly beautiful, kind, strong, but what lies behind that fake smile? The moment will come when everyone will regret their actions. They will make sure of that. Part 1. The little girl ran as fast as she could, away from this gloomy village. This place could hardly be called home. All around her was human hatred. How could anyone beat, scream, and push an innocent child, the flesh and blood of their hero? This was an existence, not a life. She had no normal family, no friends, but she had numerous bruises and scars from beatings. Now she had only one goal. She had to run away. And it didn't matter where or for how long. If not for the bruises and the rather shabby clothes, she could easily have been called a beauty. Even though she was only 5 years old. Her sun-blonde hair, reaching to her waist, was now dirty and unevenly cut, like scraps of old fabric. Her eyes were as blue as the sea and her body was thin. She had an older brother, a mother, and a father who were no different from the rest of the villagers. They considered her weak and a problem child, although they never took care of her. And then they didn't even consider her family and evicted her from the house. She didn't even have time to understand how it all happened. Where had all the kindness and warmth gone? How abruptly it all ended. Her life was like a dog's, when the owner doesn't take care of her and hates her for her disobedience and lack of understanding. She couldn't even stay at the shelter for long. After a month, they shoved the keys into her hands and kicked her out to a dormitory. It was old, shabby, with a long leaking roof and a terrible smell of rotten meat. A cracking sound was heard somewhere behind her. The girl, her heart sinking, stopped and froze. They'd found her. There was no use running, they. Jonin of the Hidden Leaf Village. Find the Jinchuriki? No problem, and give her an extra beating. Just in case, so she doesn't think twice about running away and wasting their precious time. And just as one of them was about to strike, an ash-haired ANBU leaped forward and blocked the girl. We were given the task to bring it as quickly as possible, don't waste time. A firm, cold voice rang out from under the mask. Everyone froze. It seemed he was their commander. Afterwards, this same ANBU simply walked up to her and picked her up. They won't touch you, he whispered quietly and jumped onto the nearest branch. They might not touch her here, but the beatings in Konoha will continue. But this gave her hope. Not all people are so bad. Naruto is already 11. After that man protected her, she increasingly noticed that he began to shield people with bad intentions from the girl. And then he took guardianship over her altogether and began to consider her a daughter. This was Hatake Kakashi, or perhaps her half-father's student. At first, there were suspicions that he was the same as Namake's, but all these disappeared when she learned about the scandal surrounding her guardianship. Hatake pursued his goal to the last and finally persuaded the Hokage. This did not go without consequences. He was no longer an ANBU, but an ordinary shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. This did not bother anyone much. Kakashi became very attached to this girl, Uzumaki. He accepted her as his own daughter, and Naruto herself began to see him as a reason to live, not just exist, even though Enai-san had been his former savior. Kakashi told her stories, bought her clothes, fed and cherished her, and after 2 years, he began training her. After some time, Naruto took the surname Hatake. They trained in the forest near their home. Almost no one came to Kakashi, and he stopped taking missions as soon as the girl turned 8. They agreed almost immediately that she would enroll in the academy in her final year. She turned out to be a true genius. Almost all complex techniques came easily. She managed to obtain scrolls on Fuinjutsu from somewhere, and given her Uzumaki blood, things progressed even faster. And by the age of 10, she could have been given the rank, if not Jonin, then certainly a strong Chunin. Of course, she was still a long way from Kakashi, but even so, it was better not to show off her abilities prematurely. The last thing she needed was to be taken to root. Things weren't going well with Kakashi's sensei. Minato, realizing the fox hadn't tried to escape his daughter's body, suddenly became consumed with the desire to return her to her former life and under his supervision. After the third such conversation, the ash-haired man couldn't take it anymore and clearly explained that it was too late and that she was, in fact, his daughter. Of course, this didn't suit Namikaze, and whenever Hatake took on a rare mission, the Hokage always tried to throw in the longest and most dangerous ones possible. To have time. As for the girl herself, she didn't even miss her former family. She was understandably happy with everything as it was. No one bothers you, and you no longer see those hated people, but there's a bad feeling in your soul. She'd long since stopped showing herself to the townspeople. Although they haven't forgotten about her, they don't know what she looks like, and they don't even recognize her. As expected, the girl has become a beauty. Her hair has already reached mid-thigh, her eyes have become brighter, but sometimes they could also make you shudder. And also, you can no longer mistake her for a skeleton. No, she's not fat, but quite slender for her 11 years. Her movements are always smooth and gentle, both in life and in taijutsu. Her soft and melodic voice, from which you wouldn't guess that she's a particularly powerful shinobi. In short, a little angel with a demon inside her. And you can't even tell. Is this about the Nine Tails or about herself? 2 sen, in 3 seconds you won't see your little book again, Databeo. 1. 2. T. The disgruntled girl glanced sideways at the man, who was lying so comfortably on a branch and desperately pretending to be asleep. In Naruto's hands, only a sharpened kunai twirled warningly. Oh. You're already back from training in the forest, what a great girl you are. How wonderful, the sun, the breeze, the trees, scary Naruto, tomorrow's trip to the academy, simply wonderful, isn't it? He quickly jumped up, hid the book and nervously looked at the tree broken off by the kunai. Let's go train, the younger Hatake said firmly. It had become a habit. She was so eager to take revenge on her father that she had to train practically every day. First, as soon as she woke up and ate a quick breakfast, she'd run into the forest near her house and begin to exhaust herself. She'd throw kunai and shuriken, practice throwing saban at dummies. Then came various techniques, chakra control, and meditation. This all took quite a while. By evening, she'd return home and drag Kakashi to train her and point out her shortcomings. At first, the man was dissatisfied, but also proud of her desperate desire to become stronger. During a conversation about, I need more rest, the girl responded quite logically. What else is there to do all day? Regarding the trip to the city, Hatake responded rather sharply, her whole demeanor showing that she had no desire yet to remember the past and the faces of other people. Okay, let's do it differently. You are a girl after all. So why not garden, embroider, sing, cook instead of just eating ramen? At your own risk, Kakashi suggested then. This idea angered and slightly offended the blonde. Of course, she didn't indulge in flower gardening or singing, but she took up sewing and cooking seriously. Knowing that being a shinobi is dangerous and even, in some ways, expensive. The Jinchuriki herself had noticed more than once how often clothes got torn during training and sparring. Accidentally falling, getting hit by a kunai, and so on. Usually, she would just grab another change of clothes right away. Surely she wouldn't force Hatake to mend her clothes. He had enough problems as it was, let alone this. The food situation was simpler. They started quietly throwing out the ramen. And no matter how hard she tried to catch the man doing it, to have proof that she wasn't the one gobbling it up at night, alas, nothing worked. They refused to buy her a new one and simply shoved vegetables and meat into her hands. With great difficulty, she learned to cook and how, and now she even feeds Hatake's senior Naruto. You have to go to the academy tomorrow, and you need to get some rest. Hatake tried to make excuses, even though he knew it was futile. After her training, the girl always found the jonin if he didn't want to train her further. No matter where he tried to hide or escape, the blonde literally pulled him out of the ground. No. Let's go practice. Continued to stand her ground, Jinchuriki. If that's the case, then let's go. I'll show you the way to the academy, and we'll stop by for some new clothes. I've been assigned a mission tomorrow that I can't refuse, so I won't be able to see you off. Kakashi sighed heavily. This time, he couldn't resist his sensei, and, giving in, agreed to the mission. It involved spying on a particularly dangerous missing nin. As expected, this assignment was also quite long-term. It could last from several months to a couple of years, depending on how everything goes. And of course, the Hokage will try to take his daughter back again, basically, as always. But it's better for her not to know about that. He'll somehow plan everything himself so that she continues training without thinking about how dangerous it might be. Usually, this greatly affects her sleep and physical activity. At these times, she can't think about studying, only about how bad the fourth is and what a total ass he is, and whether Toussaint ate her in the morning. Otherwise, like last time, she'll fall from a branch and immediately faint. His life is a fairy tale. What? The blonde immediately became indignant and snorted with displeasure. Is the Hokage still thinking about my return home? And when will you return? She slumped her shoulders and looked down. Kakashi smiled reassuringly and patted her head. I don't know yet, but I think in about 2 weeks. It's a lie. A complete lie. I'll leave tonight and will most likely return in the morning as usual. If I come back at all, he jerked from his own thought. I think this will do, Naruto said matter-of-factly, gently running his hand over the fabric of the suit and completely ignoring the admiring glances from the other shoppers. No one recognized her. Of course, this was her first time out in several years in the crowded village. Kakashi, standing next to him, was already twitching. 3 of the blue-eyed girl's peers had already approached them. One offered to take them for a walk, another to get something to eat, and the third's mother actually worked at the clothing store and was offering them a discount. And now the blonde was gesturing toward what he considered a too revealing suit. With great difficulty, the Jinchuriki managed to win it back, at least without a verbal beating, a fight, of course. They also took another, slightly similar one, also dark in color. Even my clothes aren't that gloomy. He looked skeptically at his daughter and slowly walked home. Let's drop off the groceries and then we can take a walk in the park. It's not far from home. He glanced sadly at Naruto and continued on his way. She had no idea yet that this might be their last meeting. Hi, Toussaint. After telling a random guy who suggested they go for a walk next time, once again, she galloped off after Hatake. The next morning, a letter arrived about the death of the Jonin, who hadn't even made it to his destination. Help me destroy the village. A calm and even tone, as if it wasn't the fox who was the demon and the killer of many people. Tear off the P. What? Kyubi almost fell off his paws. You heard everything. Why would that be? You know perfectly well that you'll die. He started looking for a catch. Just imagine. You're lying there, watching the negative emotions begin to consume your Jinchuriki, just about ready to be released, and then, lo and behold, everything stops and a girl shows up to visit you. Now she's standing impossibly close to the cage, inquisitively begging you to help her destroy her own village. It's beneficial for both you and me. And what difference does it make to you whether I die or not? I no longer have anyone for whom I will live. She spoke sharply and crouched down, her eyes fixed on the Kyubi, studying him closely. A large, dark red fox with 9 tails fluttering like cells. A terrifying thirst for blood literally dug into her skin, leaving an unpleasant sensation. The blonde was unafraid, standing firmly and peering into the darkness, beyond which were visible poisonous red eyes, filled with nothing but pain. She immediately understood who was to blame for his condition. People. These ruthless and incredibly stupid, soulless creatures. They still dared to call themselves people. And she no longer considered herself as such. And because of whom? The answer was obvious. Oh, it will be more profitable for me if you are still alive. Rolled his eyes in irritation. The village is still ruled by the fourth. At that moment, she growled almost as loudly as Fox. Hatake shared his feelings completely. That same day, she began training with a more intensive schedule. She skipped the academy today. You said she'd be weak. That's what you call weak, Minato said after reading the report on his daughter's fun training. It should have been. We sealed almost all of her chakra. How did that happen? Could it be she was able to break the seal? Kushina paced nervously around the office. During Naruto's entire time living in their house, the red-haired girl was the only one who even tried to treat her normally, as a daughter. Naruto's brother also kept up with his Kachan and tried to somehow shield his sister from problems and their father. This all came to an end one night when the entire Uzumaki Namikaze family woke up to strange voices from above and an inhuman roar. From the room, the Jinchuriki. Part 2. GRGH. A dull growl echoed through the house, barely audible. Uzumaki was the first to wake up. Kushina, or the fourth Hokage's wife. A feeling of anxiety screamed, "Something's wrong." Ignoring it, she lay back down and tried to sleep, suddenly imagining Minato sleeping like a log. But the sounds came again, louder this time. Arg. Namikaze woke up too. What happened? Immediately, practically by reflex, he pulled a kunai from a nearby shelf and stared at his wife. The red-haired woman pointed uncertainly upward. It's from the second floor. The moment of stupor would have continued if not for that sound again. The couple exchanged glances and simultaneously jumped up. Children! And immediately ran for the stairs. Oddly enough, along the way they encountered Menma, the eldest child of the Uzumaki Namikaze family. The brunette stood motionless, staring at his sister's door, fighting the urge to run or burst into the room. What happened? Kushina asked excitedly, and without waiting for an answer, she burst into her daughter's room and froze, stunned. Naruto sat in the far corner of the room, hugging her knees and swaying back and forth. Her face was pale as porcelain, and tears streamed from her glassy, staring eyes. Fear was etched on her face, but she remained motionless. The wall near her began to contract and twist. The fox's poisonous chakra was making itself felt. When she let out another roar, the members of the Uzumaki Namikaze family could make out something resembling a plea in her voice. The entire scene caused everyone standing by the door to shudder. After a few seconds, the parents finally recovered and jerked from their spot. Kushina shielded her son, and Minato rushed to find the suppression seal. It's unknown how long they spent fiddling with it, but one thing became clear. Things would never be the same. The family had completely distanced itself from Naruto. The Uzumaki, so much so that they began to ignore her. Shame on the Hokage demon. No one called her by her name anymore, those were the only nicknames. When she went outside, all the commotion and noise ceased, and the atmosphere grew tense. She dressed in black clothes that were 2 sizes too big, and pulled her hair back into a low ponytail, all so that at least no one would notice her. They didn't throw stones at her back or head, or even empty bottles. Sometimes drunk shinobi would chase her. They beat her, shouted insults, but didn't dare kill her. Those were the rules. The Umbu assigned to the Hokage merely watched with a kind of sadistic pleasure. And when her nearly lifeless body fell to the pavement, they picked her up and carried her to the hospital. Where, too, they weren't particularly eager to help the demon. The wounds were washed with water, bandaged, and done. You're healthy. Don't come back again. Looking at all this, the child didn't understand. Why me? No, she didn't wish this on anyone, not yet. Over time, she began to notice Kachan's eyes turning red more often, perhaps from tears, perhaps from anger. Father and Enisen simply looked away guiltily, but continued to remain silent and ignore the girl. Naruto didn't feel pity or regret from them, only hatred and fear. Maybe she simply didn't notice the first two, or maybe they didn't even exist. The Jinchuriki was at a loss. What should she feel besides misunderstanding and resentment? What could they even give her? Afterwards, it became clear why Kushina was crying, and Menma and Minato were looking away. They simply kicked her out of the house. So she began living in an orphanage. For a while. There, too, she was disliked. The teachers were afraid of her, the children whispered behind her back and tried to avoid her, taking away her food. One of the overseers even suggested putting the Jinchuriki in the attic, so the children would be safe. Just a month passed, and she was kicked out of there too. It wasn't that she wanted to stay there, but she was upset. They gave Naruto a one-room apartment, very shabby and with an unpleasant smell permeating the entire premises. It was on the outskirts of the village. When people found out about it, they simply came and burned the house alive. At the time, no one cared that other people might have been there. If they acquitted her, they waved their hands, already considering themselves heroes. Back then, Minato was angry, he was downright furious. Whatever others thought, he was genuinely worried about his children. Namikaze completely agreed that he was a complete idiot and cretin for doing that to his daughter. But what if he was also worried about Menma? Namikaze Menma is the eldest child of the 4th Hokage, a student at the academy, a truly gifted child, but still no genius. He plans to become the head of the Namikaze clan in the distant future, as he inherited almost nothing from the Uzumaki clan, only a huge amount of chakra and incredible endurance. The boy loved his Imuto very much, often playing when he had time, and together with Kushina, taught him to write and read. From an early age, he believed he would protect him from the attention of boys and arrogant girls, but in the end, he couldn't even protect his parents from the hatred and cruelty of people. Then Namikaze announced that Naruto would no longer be living with them. As Minato said then, she must cope and become strong on her own. This was a huge blow for him and Kachan. To avoid further pain, they simply ignored her, secretly fearing for her, even though she was still Uzumaki at the time. Well, she had become strong and could cope, but not alone. Kakashi kindly helped her with this. Then the Hokage practically staged a rebellion, deciding that Hatake could ruin everything, and his daughter would remain a timid weakling. And he truly believed it when they stopped reporting Uzumaki's location to him. She stopped going outside and cast a powerful Fuin barrier on Hatake's territory, which even experienced Ambiyu could not break. The only thing left was to extract information from his student. And so, only several years later, the blonde managed to send Hatake on a long mission. Minato could confidently say that this time would be enough to win the Jinchuriki over. No matter how much stronger she became, the village's main weapon must always serve and be loyal only to the Hokage and Konoha, and by extension, to the villagers. Recently, Genin and Chunin had come to him to complain that some super cute, beautiful, kind, and just cheerful blonde had destroyed 3 training grounds while training, in an hour. It wasn't hard to guess who it was. Even back then, Minato had entered a spatial state. After a few clarifications, the theory was confirmed. Was this how she was getting revenge on him? You called, Hokage-sama? A melodic yet sardonic voice asked after being given permission to enter. And without waiting for an answer, she stepped softly over the threshold. Ignoring the surprise of those around her, she bowed, hiding a sly smile behind her hair. Oh yes, she had expected this. Who knew that from that shabby, dirty, and skinny girl she could become like this? You're late. He looked at his daughter, wide-eyed, increasingly surprised. What was Kakashi even thinking? He knew about his daughter's training, of course, and was very surprised when Hatake told him she would be entering the academy 2 years early. Minato attributed this to the fact that she was, after all, his daughter, and her status could help. When Naruto walked in, he couldn't believe his eyes. No, Hatake, this is too much. She's too kind, too soft and gentle, not just in her gait, but in her voice too. Does that mean she's the same person, or is she just like Kushina? Sorry I'm late, I got lost on the road called life. That voice again, and Kakashi's excuses. This time, everyone jumped. Oddly enough, the heads of the Nara and Uchiha clans were in the office. With a slight smile, she walked over to the sofa and sat down leisurely, never taking her eyes off the Hokage. She was already used to looking everyone in the eye and instilling uncertainty in their next actions. The first to experience this was the great and terrible nine-tailed demon fox, or simply Kurama. Ahem. The fourth cleared his throat and looked away. No, he wasn't ready to stare at the Jinchuriki right now. Why did you do this to the training ground? If it was you, of course. He finished hesitantly, but still glanced at his daughter. I was just training. Usually, my training takes place in the forest, not far from home. She began her story innocently, but then turned her gaze to the ceiling, lost in thought. I just thought that since I was going to the academy, I should get to know the streets and the people better. So I stumbled upon a few training grounds and decided to practice. And again that smile that you want to believe. About the academy. I don't think you're ready to go straight to your last year of training, Namikaze said in a firmer and more confident voice. After all, he's the Hokage or what? Again she ran into her daughter's gaze. Can she even read minds? The training grounds weren't enough for you? Oh, I can destroy something bigger. She blinked her eyes and jumped up. Bravo, you're playing well. No. Wow, they even believed you. Ahem, fine, you'll study there for a week, and then your teacher will tell you whether you can study in that class or not. The blonde, hearing the answer, calmed down, stood up straight, and bowed. Thank you, Hokage-sama, I won't let you down. Allow me to leave, she said, waving her hand and heading for the door. I'm truly sorry for Irika, was the only thing the blonde heard before closing the door. I'm a quiet, modest person. If you anger me, I'll quietly beat you up and modestly celebrate, Hatake said calmly and quietly, so that only the brunette could hear, with the sweetest smile and wide-open eyes that looked at Menma with a hint of mockery. He shuddered, but nevertheless sat down at the other desk. You're a master of intimidation, look how pale Namikaze has turned. The very picture of innocence. Fox immediately interjected hesitantly. He certainly wouldn't mind punishing this insolent boy, but his Jinchuriki's words had completely unsettled him. I just read it somewhere and it just stuck. The blonde chuckled and looked mockingly at her brother. So you can remember this, but not my stories about the turkey Madara? Naruto sighed heavily. How much longer can this go on? It had all started out well enough. She walked into the classroom with her head held high, nodded, and walked past the teacher. Hello, my name is Naruto Hatake. From now on I'll be in your class, I hope we can become friends, she said, tilting her head slightly and smiling at her stunned classmates. Teacher, where should I sit? After a few seconds, Yumino came to his senses and looked around the room. Almost everyone's eyes immediately turned to Irika. Who would they seat her with? Who could possibly be so lucky? Take any empty seat. After looking around again and nodding, she headed to the very back, to an empty desk by the window. No matter how much Hatake played the role of being friendly and sweet, she couldn't sit and tolerate someone for a year. The lesson was boring and tedious. The Jinchuriki had been studying all this for quite some time. After all, she'd picked up not only the habit of being late but also reading from Kakashi. Though not quite the same reading as him. She enjoyed studying the histories of the hidden villages, various techniques, the many properties of chakra, and so on. During recess, almost all of her classmates surrounded her, asking her questions and asking her to be friends. But something happened that no one expected, Namikaze. Menma sat down next to the new girl and stubbornly refused to leave. We need to talk, was all he said, and the rest is history. Well, shall we go train, Kurama? The blonde asked her personal demon with a devilish smile. Lessons are over, time to rest. You meant take Minato's hair gray? Part 3. Blinding, half fainting, a dizziness that made my heart clench. A cold and frightening aura permeated the dark office. Not a single sound was audible, perhaps only rustling somewhere on the ground floor or even outside. Perhaps it was the impeccable organization of the space. The ochre reflections of natural light from the window? The overwhelming contrast with the chaos outside? You are the second heir of the great clan, so why haven't you become like your genius brother? A calm yet steely voice echoed through the room. Uchiha Fugaku sat in his black chair, matching the rest of the interior, and looked intently at his youngest son. I'll train more, Sasuke replied, as always, and after permission, he bowed and left the office. Stepping out of the stuffy room, his breathing immediately became easier, and his heart, pounding wildly with rage and a certain resentment calmed. He was already 12 years old, and these negotiations with his father never ended. Every year on his birthday, Fugaku summoned the brunette to his office and completely ruined his mood. Because of this, each year the training increased, and the program became more rigorous. Almost like Sasuke. From a sociable but reserved child, he became more withdrawn, not letting anyone near him, aloof, but not shy. More like a small ball of darkness, the kind the villagers have been rumored to be for centuries. The Uchiha clan is cruel, merciless, but loyal. These last words always calmed the villagers, but their wariness remained. And who were they loyal to exactly? Everyone believed the Uchiha clan was kept in check only thanks to the fourth Hokage, who was able to find common ground with the Uchiha clan head. Although the father was cold to his second son, he did so only to help him grow stronger and stand up for himself, not to be forever behind his brother's back. Mikoto often chided him, saying, "That's no way to raise children." But the Uchiha always stood his ground. Mikoto, for her part, tried to devote more attention to her children. Sasuke was always training or at the academy, and Itachi was again on dangerous missions. Previously, when Itachi was still at the academy, the two brothers spent much more time together, even training, but over time they began to drift apart. Sasuke, because of his conversations with his father, considered himself too honored to communicate with Anai-san. Itachi watched silently, understanding. His brother was too confused. For 2 years, he fought the urge to approach Otuto and simply talk, but by the time he finally made up his mind, it was too late. "You were late, Anai-san. I've long since stopped caring about anyone or anything. I don't intend to have any connections, they'll only get in my way." He said it so distantly that the older man even became wary. Was this really his younger brother? The one who always greeted him with a smile after the academy, asking him to train or play. No, this wasn't him anymore. Sasuke finally took matters into his own hands and stopped trusting anyone. Listen? Please. But not trust. He began stricter training, only showing up home during mealtimes or at night, when it was time for bed. This frightened the whole family, and deciding not to make the situation worse, they simply didn't interfere. "Exo!" the brunette hissed quietly, with venom in his voice, descending the stairs. How annoying it all was. When would they finally leave him alone and simply forget about the Uchiha? Sasuke wasn't there at all. Mikoto and Itachi met him on the ground floor, with weak, hesitant smiles. He snorted discreetly and walked to the table. His father had called him early in the morning. He hadn't even had time to eat properly. "Happy birthday, Sasuke," the relatives said simultaneously, keeping a close eye on the Uchiha. The brunette nodded slightly and began eating. "You still have the academy today, will you make it?" This time only Mikoto asked, pouring tomato juice into a glass. Perhaps this was Sasuke's only weakness. Only with this juice and tomatoes could he be somewhat drawn into conversation. "I'll just transport myself with Shunshin." "Wow," he said a whole sentence. It didn't surprise anyone present that much, but... "When did you learn this technique?" This time, Itachi spoke up. He exchanged glances with Mikoto and sat down next to his brother. "It doesn't matter. Thanks for the food, Kasan, I have to go." He rose from the table and headed for the hallway, grabbing the school supplies he prepared last night. Before leaving, he heard a quiet, "Good luck and be careful." As always, though. "Blonde all," an indifferent voice called after the girl as she walked away. She stopped and didn't turn around, returning the favor. "Duck butt," the girl said mockingly, but nevertheless turned her entire body to face her interlocutor. Her heavenly eyes sparkled with imps, so well hidden from others, but you can't hide anything from the Uchiha, especially when it comes to his failed friend. Pfft. Sasuke merely snorted at the nickname and, turning away, walked toward the block. This peculiar farewell had become a habit for them. When no one was around, just before going home, they were obliged to tease each other, and then ignore each other again at school. In just 3 days, they became rivals at the academy and gradually, without even realizing it, began to change. The Uchiha family noticed these changes, though only after 2 weeks. The first time, when Sasuke came home and even greeted not only Enai-san and Ka-san, but even deigned to nod to Fugaku. The second time, when he began to occasionally interject into their conversations at the table. A week later, when he began to reflect, a barely noticeable smile would appear on his lips, brief but enhancing his expression. Mikoto, as the only woman in the house, was the first to come up with some peculiar ideas. And so, during dinner, when the whole family was already gathered and seated at the table, she put down her chopsticks and stared intently at one of her sons. The brunette, not understanding what Ka-san wanted, continued eating, but still glanced sideways at the woman. "Sasuke, do you like someone?" the brunette finally asked after a few minutes, immediately clapping Itachi on the back as he choked. Fugaku spilled his tea, and Sasuke, who hadn't even had time to drink it, already felt a piece of tomato stuck in his throat. "Cough, Ka-chan?" Itachi cleared his throat a little and began looking from his brother to Mikoto, even at his father, dumbfounded. Sasuke swallowed slowly and, as if nothing had happened, replied, "No, why such questions?" He finally swallowed the poor tomato and looked into Ka-san's eyes. This conversation was really stressful, and it seemed he wasn't the only one. Look how Fukaga and Itachi were, discreetly, listening. "You've been acting very strange for the last few days, constantly daydreaming." The woman shrugged, her dark eyes flashing slyly. "My answer is the same. Thank you for the food, I'm going upstairs." Not wanting to continue the conversation, he decided to make a quick exit. As he rounded the first corner, he immediately heard a worried whisper. "Are you sure?" Judging by the voice, it belonged to the head of the family. "He's only 12, and he's already found his soulmate. He won't suffer like most of our clan, will he?" The eldest son spoke this time. "I don't know, I hope everything will be alright." Then came the rustling and clanking of dishes. Apparently, that was the end of the conversation. Entering his room and changing into his house clothes, Uchiha lay down on the futon and fell into serious thought. He didn't like today's conversation at all. What was the problem with his behavior? Yes, sometimes he escapes reality, falling into his own illusions in his head. And all thanks to whom? Oh yes, because of one blue-eyed Hataki. The sight of one blonde makes you want to smile, but instead you're insolent and constantly arguing with her. Yes, he wants her to become his friend and partner in the future, someone he can have his back to. He'd seen her fight many times at the academy, and also noticed that this is far from all she can do. She always had graceful movements, but when an arm or leg twitched for a suitable strike, she quickly changed trajectory and deliberately made a mistake. All these shortcomings were clearly visible to the Uchiha. The teachers may have thought, just lacking experience. But Sasuke didn't believe such tales. They themselves had never fought, only competed in kunai throwing, which ended in a draw. All they did was mock each other, but not at the academy. Strangely, almost every day they met at various training grounds, on the streets, or in stores. And guess what? They would immediately start fighting. Ahem. Quarreling and practically yelling in the middle of the street. If Sasuke weren't an Uchiha, he might have done this at the academy, too, every free minute. The same would be true for Naruto, if her acting hadn't gotten in the way. He found it interesting to watch this theater she performed. Unlike others, he immediately realized it was all pretense and not her true feelings. All those smiles, the mischievous voice, it was all fake and put on. The only thing he didn't understand was why she was putting on this whole show. The brunette desperately wanted her to show her true self, to him specifically. From the moment she first walked into the classroom, Sasuke could see the pain and hurt in those sapphire eyes. She was seeking support from those who could understand and accept her. And Uchiha did just that, but in his own way. He began discreetly extracting information about her life, allowing more accidental encounters. He even won a few training sessions together, and she still called him Duckbutt. Their recent conversation immediately came to mind. "Hey, dummy, I was wondering why you dyed your hair blonde, or were you dipped in dye as a kid?" Sasuke asked, his voice slightly cocky, watching his classmate's reaction with interest. She first blushed, then turned green, then blushed again, but even more so, clearly angry. And I wonder where your hairdresser got his hands on it? Duck butt? And again that mischievous look in her blue eyes. Everything would be fine, but those blue eyes had captivated the Uchiha from the very first day at the academy. But the girl turned out to have a tough temper and wasn't eager to fall at the feet of the local star. This even made it more interesting to argue with her and watch her, wondering what she would do next. But how can you communicate normally with someone who calls you an ass to your face? This question had been stuck in his head for quite some time, but he wasn't at all embarrassed by the nickname he'd given her. Sasuke honestly thought, blonde all suited Naruto perfectly. Of course, he could call her a hurricane, but still. But what does duckbutt have to do with it? If his family heard about this, he's sure even Itachi and Fugaku would laugh. There's only one conclusion. Uchiha is head over heels in love, and despite all his observation and genius, he managed to deny it. Sasuke is very, very stupid. Part 4. POV Naruto. It's been cold in Konoha a lot lately. A strong wind blows, a torrential downpour roars. Everything seems so gray and dull. It feels like the weather reveals my true feelings when I come here. But I still remember warm, kind days. It was so nice and calm, the sun caressed you with its gentle rays, the air was so fresh, and you wanted to stay outside and train all day. He was alive then. There's only a large marble stone here with your name carved into it. Flashback. Naruto laughs loudly, attracting attention, and says utter nonsense, but there's joy and warmth in her eyes. She laughs so childishly and sincerely. Hatake watches this with a smile, but as soon as the blonde looks at him, his gaze becomes serious and stern again. This makes the laughter grow even louder. Naruto, this isn't funny. A calm voice is heard in the clearing. The Jinchuriki calms down and looks at his father again, only to burst into laughter again. This time with Hatake Sr. The man sits on the thick grass, hands on hips. He's flushed pink, and something, knowing Naruto, told him so. It's definitely not going away. But he couldn't be angry with this fidget. He'd become too attached to this hurricane. He doesn't see her as a monster or a Ninetales, doesn't see her as the village's weapon. Kakashi sees only the once-cornered daughter, whose psyche was broken daily by humans. They didn't know her at all, so why all this? Yes, he himself didn't do anything at first, until he was informed of the Jinchuriki's escape. Hatake had previously been neutral toward the girl, but seeing how they were about to beat her, he desperately wanted to protect this child. So he took her in. At first, the blonde was afraid of literally everything, even tried to escape several times, but she finally accepted Hatake, though not right away. After just 3 years, she was cheerfully painting all the trees in the forest near her house, and then destroying them herself. Walking there afterwards was dangerous. Kami forbid she step on a shattered snag, or worse, fall. It turned out that was just the tip of the iceberg. Who knew she'd grow up to be such a tease, and a jokester to boot? First, she somehow managed to turn him green, then dragged some animals from the forest first thing in the morning. She somehow made them sit still for several hours and hypnotize Hatake nonstop. He didn't make ramen, the hypnosis didn't work, but the animals from their former habitats suddenly all disappeared. What book are you always reading? Come, paradise, huh? She raised one eyebrow busily and, under Hatake's twitching eye, pulled out the very book from the press. I wonder what's in it. And, pretending to start reading, she turned away. A heavy sigh was heard behind her. You know, I've never been blackmailed so politely before. Hatake rolled his eyes and, standing up, nevertheless took the book from his favorite author. Let's go, I'll practice. Yeah. Just don't put the book away too far, in case I need it again. She laughed mischievously and, catching up with the man, jumped on his back. End flashback. This time the girl couldn't help herself, grabbed her shoulders and collapsed onto the wet grass. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. It was cold and disgusting. No matter how much she smiled, she couldn't shake these memories. It hurt too much. Someone grabbed her shoulders from behind and shook her slightly, causing Naruto to flinch and turn around. It was Sasuke, her eternal rival at the academy. He muttered something discontentedly, constantly casting skeptical and stern glances at Hatake. Are you completely out of your mind? You're already soaked through dobe? He exhaled irritably and lifted the blonde to her feet, staring into her eyes. Where do you live? He was about to transfer them with Shunshin, but seeing how she bounced away from him, he raised an eyebrow questioningly. It's fine, I'll get there myself, bye. And was already about to run away, but her legs from the recent hysteria gave way and she collapsed to the ground again. Growling something quietly, Uchiha jumped up to his classmate and, despite her feeble resistance, picked her up. TCH, stupid Uzurutanki, she'll get sick. Uchiha! Where did you drag me? This was the first thing the Uchiha family heard. I told you I could walk on my own. The blonde squealed when she was thrown onto the sofa in the living room, and a thick blanket was thrown over her. I don't remember, Uchiha said emotionlessly and went to make tea. Naruto didn't like this outcome of events and, getting up from the sofa, after all, having taken the blanket, went after it. Mikoto was present in the kitchen, cooking something, and footsteps were heard from the stairs. Apparently, Itachi had already returned. So what's the problem? Remember! She raised her index finger in the direction of the brunette and frowned. They had not noticed the strangers until now, who were looking at the two teenagers with obvious curiosity and surprise. Yes. Then. Itachi and Mikoto simply blinked at this entertaining dialogue. And the children continued to argue about something. They were used to it. Every time they started their squabbles, their masks fell, but they didn't become eternally gloomy and angry people, more like children who had a falling out, rather than very strong shinobi in the future. Sasuke? What took you so long and who is this girl? The head of the house's wife finally asked and quietly gasped, surprised by her appearance. Now she was able to get a good look at the guest. Naruto, seeing the reaction, smiled awkwardly and scratched the back of her head, but immediately removed her hand. An annoying habit. This is my classmate, Naruto Hatake. Sasuke shrugged and continued drinking tea, discreetly keeping an eye on his brother and mother. Hatake? Did Kakashi-kun have children? The brunette asked in surprise, which made everyone turn their gaze to her. Two interested and one wary. Yes, she knew Hatake quite well. Her friend Kushina used to come visit often, sometimes with her husband, but more often alone to check on her old friend. The Uchiha clan is renowned for its power and coldness. Their quarter was generally avoided, lest the red-eyed ones notice them. But this overly energetic woman was unfazed. Once, she even managed to drag one of her husband's students there. Even then, she noted that he was a rather withdrawn guy, but remembering that his father had committed suicide, everything fell into place. However, after a while, Kushina disappeared from her sight. When the Uchiha decided to visit her herself, she saw only desolate and sad eyes. Just like hers when Mikoto sees her youngest son. She didn't manage to find out anything then. Uzumaki politely sent her out of the house without really explaining anything. Events can happen in anyone's life that plunge them into despair and hopelessness, and escaping from that state can be very difficult. Mikoto felt exactly that. First, her son began to distance himself from her, which then led to arguments with her husband, and eventually, her friend. Itachi was her support. Always calm and understanding, he could offer advice or a moment to talk, but he remains a very strong shinobi and is most often on missions. Only in the late afternoon would he return and have a short chat with Kachan, and then catch up on sleep. The only good news was that Sasuke had started to be more lively again. If you could call it that. His behavior, however, was completely baffling to everyone. He'd come back from the academy cheerful, then with an "I hate everyone and everything" expression, and sometimes with an indescribable expression like, "Don't ask, I'm still in shock myself." Today, in fact, he was quite late. The food was already starting to get cold, the rest of the family had long since finished dinner, and were busy with their own affairs. Fugaku was in his favorite office, Itachi was sharpening kunai upstairs, judging by the sound, and the woman herself was just going out into the hallway to put her son's dinner in the refrigerator, when a conversation could be heard in the living room. Imagine her surprise when she saw Sasuke seating a girl on the sofa, whose face she couldn't even see because of the wet hair that covered her face. After disappearing for a few seconds, the brunette reappeared and sloppily wrapped her in a blanket. A clearly displeased person. She heard quiet footsteps behind her. The brunette turned and, having confirmed that it was her eldest son, again turned her interested gaze to the children. Naruto and Sasuke were still continuing their interesting dialogue, but now standing in the kitchen and sipping hot tea. Did I imagine it, or did anyone catch Sasuke's signature HN and HM? The Uchiha whispered quietly, hoping that Kami wouldn't notice them and they wouldn't learn anything else. It was quite interesting to watch the brunette show a faint concern for the girl, but she didn't share their opinion. But soon they emerged from their hideout, or corner, and began to get acquainted. The news that the Jonin had a daughter greatly surprised her. The son of the White Fang had almost no contact with people. Had he really found his chosen one? Unfortunately, she hadn't heard about that yet. As for the girl herself, she was so beautiful and vibrant that the Uchiha involuntarily began to compare the children. Sasuke, who was always like a gloomy cloud, and this ray of light. Even his gait. The Uchiha walked with perfect posture and an arrogant gaze, while the blonde was already jumping, if not flying, but at certain moments she was restrained. Mikoto noticed this only when she stopped reproaching her son and noticed them. The only thing that worried her and Itachi was that after their appearance, the girl seemed to become a completely different person. She stopped reproaching Sasuke, but still glanced at him with displeasure. She stopped shaking her wet head, trying to remove the stuck-on hair. Uchiha, however, wasn't even surprised, merely glanced mockingly in her direction and gestured toward 2 more cups of tea. And when did he have time? It was pouring outside and we went inside. Uchiha finally answered, seeing his brother's raised eyebrow. At that very second, Naruto shuddered strangely. Sasuke, go change. Naruto, follow me, you're sore. What? The woman said discontentedly, taking the girl's small hand and leading her to her room. Quietly closing the door, Mikoto immediately went to the rather large closet and began looking for suitable clothes. Preferably 2 sizes smaller. It was immediately noticeable that Hatake was quite thin. The Uchiha even wanted to feed her, but such a build actually suited her. What were you doing outside for so long? She finally found her once favorite sundress and approached the awkwardly standing girl. I wanted to take a walk in the park, but it started raining. Then I met Sasuke and we moved here. Hatake answered, picking up the clothes. The woman in front of her seemed kind and talkative. She didn't really want to deceive her, but circumstances forced her to. Mikoto smiled reassuringly and led her to sit on the couch, seeing that the girl herself was uncomfortable with the whole situation. I see. You're friends with him, aren't you? It seemed like a normal question, but clearly stumped Hatake. Sasuke, friends? What does that mean? Mikoto was stumped now. Looking at this girl, you immediately thought, how many friends can she have? And she even asks, as if you didn't have any friends? These words flew out of her mouth, so Uchiha didn't even immediately understand the question she had asked. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand and held out a blue seraphim with the crest of her clan. Not really. Naruto said after a few minutes and looked away. I almost never went out into the village itself, and only recently went to the academy. The blonde, now dressed, continued. She awkwardly clutched the fabric and lowered her head. The image of Sasuke appeared before the woman's eyes again. They were similar. He used to look the same way, not understanding why his father treated him this way, but after that, he stopped showing any emotion at all. She quickly approached Hatake and smiled reassuringly again, leaning slightly towards her face. Gently, she brushed a strand of hair from her face and led her to the mirror. Let me comb your hair, I think it will dry faster that way. She sat her down on a chair, took out a comb, and carefully began to comb her hair. POV Naruto, it's nice. I don't remember anyone except Kakashi ever treating me like this. I've always loved and cared for my hair, but people clearly didn't like it, just like I didn't. They pulled it, cut it, and even tried to burn it a couple of times. But this woman. She acts just like, I always wanted a daughter, but I only had boys. A quiet laugh cut through the silence. Still so soft and warm. It's captivating, full of sincerity, unlike mine. She's too open and real. Your hair is just like hers, Mikoto-san said with some delight. I don't understand, is she talking about the color? And POV Naruto. What are you talking about, Mikoto-san? There were childish notes in her voice, with a drop of naivety. Hataki finally relaxed and closed her eyes, leaning her head closer to the woman's hands. My friend has the same long and thick hair. I really loved combing it and braiding it in different hairstyles. She smiled sadly and reached for the hair ties. We hardly talked to her lately. She has changed a lot, she smiled sadly and still tied 2 high ponytails on her head. Naruto listened to her and seemed to feel this pain herself. That's how much they value friends. You speak of her with a smile. I hope everything will work out. Of course. Okay, let's go, otherwise Sasuke is probably there too. The Uchiha answered more cheerfully and rolled her eyes mischievously. Oh yeah. Since it's still pouring rain, you'll be staying with us. Naruto could only wonder how they could say this so easily. Sorry, but I really have to go. If anything happens, I'll transfer myself as Shunshin. She tried to refuse, but forgot that she was facing an Uchiha, and they were such stubborn asses. Sasuke had already proven that to her more than once. What kind of youth? She already managed to learn another Shunshin. She muttered quietly, but quickly returned to her serious look. I can't let a child go at night. Shunshin often makes my head spin, especially at this age. She triumphantly raised her finger and followed forward. Naruto was again surprised by Mikoto's thoughtfulness, but still followed her. They found Sasuke already in the living room. He was sitting on the couch and was almost asleep, every now and then drinking another mug of tea. Naruto, having counted how many there were on the table and made a mental calculation, came to a conclusion. For Sasuke, tea is like ramen for her. So what? The portions are the same. Sasuke, wake up. Uchiha shook him lightly by the shoulder and waved her hand in front of his face. Get a futon for Naruto-chan from the closet in your room and go to bed. It seemed that it took the brunette so long to understand that at first he simply nodded his head obediently, and when he stood up and took a few steps, he suddenly froze. His head slowly turned towards his classmate, and, after running his eyes over her, he turned pale. She'll kill me. Mikoto immediately slapped him on the back of the head. What are you saying? Naruto is a cutie. She smiled and ruffled the children's hair, and went into her and her husband's room, leaving the children alone. It's your own fault, Uchiha. The blonde practically hissed and pretended to roll up her sleeves threateningly. Only then did he notice her clothes and smirked. What a surprise. You already wear the crest of my clan, he said ironically and dodged the fist flying at his face. You should shut up, duckbutt. How much more can this go on, huh, blondinista all?